Hey everybody, back again, and today we're taking this old US-made engineer's hammer and I'm going to make myself a really nice straight peen. I do not have a straight peen forging hammer. I have a cross peen forging hammer, and I have engineer style forging hammers. I have various types of forging hammers, but we're going to give this a very serious rounding face and a very serious peen. A little broader of a cross peen, like you see on more traditional blacksmithing hammers, and a very round face like you see on a lot of rounding forging hammers. So this will be my big time material mover, and since it's going to be almost 4 pounds, it'll be just about the perfect weight in order to move some heavy material in a hurry. So I'm going to be forging this almost 4-pound chunk of steel by hand. It's going to be pretty interesting because I don't exactly have tongs that are designed to do this, so a lot of this is going to be holding it inside of the eye of the hammer here while I hammer it and seeing how it goes. I got this at a swap meet forever ago for like $2, so I figure $2 and a bunch of my sweat versus a couple $100 for somebody else making the hammer. I think I'll do it myself. So without further ado, let's get in the fire, get started on this project.
Mainly two factors: the heat in the center of our piece of material versus the exterior. Think about it like when you're cooking food. If you want it to cook all the way through, not just cook the outside, it needs to sit in the heat longer in order for the heat to radiate into the center. So just like when you're cooking a good burger, when you're cooking a good hammer, you want to make sure it has enough soak time to get hot enough in the center. Because you can heat up the outside and move the outside without affecting the inside if the interior metal is not hot enough. Another factor we're finding is physics itself. You see, the thicker piece of material we forge, for one, the harder we're going to have to hit it to affect it. For two, the more energy it will soak up at the surface level. So that means we will have less penetration than if we were working something thinner. Basically, we're finding two factors that both don't want us to move the center of that material. And the way we have to do this is basically overcome it with more heat, more time, and more force. So I'm going to be using a 4-pound hammer to forge this 4-pound hammer. And I'm going to let this soak for roughly 10 to 20 minutes every heat after the initial heat. The initial heat, this will soak as I rotate it every 10 or so minutes for about 30 minutes to 40 minutes. This will give me adequate time to fully ensure that the center of my material is at least hot enough to forge, if not as hot as my surface material. So I'll see you guys when this is warm enough to actually hit with the hammer. So it's been about 20 minutes, and this is my second time flipping it, and as you can see, this top side's hotter, and this is not as hot. That tells me this central material, especially down in the middle here, is just not quite hot enough yet. We finally got enough heat to start trying to work this big old monster of a piece of material. Starting to shape that, but it hasn't quite changed much. This stuff is proving to be quite a beast to move. Decided that 4 pounds, probably a little slow for moving this big of a piece. 12 pounds it is. shuts. Now I'm going to go ahead and start drifting the eye a little bit more into a squarer shape. I like square eyes and diamond eyes a lot. So that's kind of what I'm going to go with here. Like that. So we got a nice square side on that side now. Now we're going to heat it up again and do the same thing on the other side. If you look at the shape of my drift here and to the depth I'm drifting it, you'll notice I'm going to create a nice hourglass shape inside of that eye with that square eye shape. So when I put in my handle and I knock in that notch where it expands at the base of the handle where it fits up and where it expands at the top, will form a dovetail kind of situation inside the hammer eye and make it much more secure. Now I've got a nice square eye on both sides. Now I'm going to go back in the fire again. We're going to start doing some accenting to this, make it look a little prettier with that fuller I made in the last video. Starting to get somewhere. It's starting to look something like a blacksmithing hammer. Got our crossbeam side forged. We still do need to do our either grinding or filing. I might just grind that beam because it'll be a lot faster since there's so much meat there. But we'll see. Might be easy enough to hot file. Now we're going to do the same thing around here that we did on the other side, just to box in the eye a little bit. our hammer shaped how we want it, which is starting to look like a real nice, real thick 4-ish pound crossbeam. So I'm going to go ahead and harden it. I've got some brine mixed up, so I'm going to do a brine quench on the whole thing. And then I'm gonna take my torch and just torch temper it all the way across both faces to soften it up a good chunk. And then our hammer will be a hammer. So let's go ahead and get this sucker hot and heat treat it.
We've now got our big boy smithing hammer formed to shape. This is going to be a awesome little straight peen. It's about a 4-pound hammer, big old chunk of steel. But I'm going to grind down this face to make a nice rounding face on this. And I'm going to grind the cross peen really thick on this so it displaces a lot of material in a very broad fashion, almost like a fullering tool would, or a strike over the horn almost. Basically mobilizing a horn into a 4-pound block. So this will be a pretty cool hammer. You can see we got that nice square eye, and looking in it, I can easily see that hourglass shape in there. It's pretty cool. Tightens up in the center and then gets broader again. I put those hexagonal shapes in just to define it a little more as a blacksmithing hammer. Temper this off camera because it's going to take a while with the torch and it'll be a pretty boring process. All I'm going to do is hit the torch on here. All I'm going to do is scuff off these areas so I can see the color of the metal and heat it until I get a straw to blue kind of color on the whole face, both sides, and probably do that 2 or 3 times just to ensure that it softens up a good amount on there. I'd rather have this deform and have to reshape it than deform my anvil, so I'm going to make sure this is a little soft on the faces. So me and this hammer are going to go have a little session of torch and scrape, and I'll be back to you guys here in a bit. So I went ahead and cleaned up my hammer here. As you can see, we've got a nice, thick, very round, but still somewhat flat. It's a pretty heavy radius. It is round all the way up. As you can see, it is a round shape all the way to the top. It's just once it hits about here, that peak becomes a lot more flat of a round shape, if that makes sense. It's much less of a radius. So instead of being like a heavy curve, it becomes much flatter. So that way it's going to displace about 1/4 inch of material, and then the rest of it will follow and spread. And as for the rounding face of the hammer, it is same thing, very nice radius. It's no longer flat here. If I roll my finger across it, I can feel, if I put a straight edge on it, you can see it gaps from the center out. There's only about 1/4 inch at the very center that it's sitting on. So the very center has about 1/4 inch of a flat spot, and the rest is spread out from there. But we've got a very pretty hammer face on both sides. Went ahead and wire brushed the whole thing so you could really see all the markings on it and see the forge details. I left a lot of hammer blows in the peen to make sure everybody knew that's hand forged, and I didn't want it to look too pretty. I wanted it to look pretty, but I wanted it to look rough and old because I like this type of aesthetic. This is going to work just as well as something that's perfectly level on either side here. I just want this aesthetics for me because I like the look of something that looks a little older than it is. I want it to look antique. And since I don't have any suitable handles, we're going to take this hickory axe handle that I got from Home Depot for 20 bucks, and we're going to use our draw knife to reshape it to fit. Then we'll go ahead and cut it down to size. If you thought I was going to use this whole handle for that light of a hammer, that's ridiculous. Just wanted to have enough handle material for making a couple handles, whether that be for axes or hammers. Now we're going to take our handy dandy draw knife and just carve a little bit off of this all the way around until the handle fits up. It needs a little more off this side and this side, just to square it up a little bit. Okay, looks like we're at about the appropriate width now. Now we just need the right height. Round up these corners a little bit.
we go. Now she'll start to fit up. Let's get it attached. So we've got our handle wedged in place. Now I'm just gonna take the draw knife and I'm gonna round up the handle just a little bit up here. And this is all up to personal preference. You don't have to do this. I'm just making this more comfortable for me. And you can see that draw knife puts in some work when it comes to just shaving off material. You can see I have lots of these really thin shavings, but it can also take off good sized chunks if I tell it I want it to bite. So pretty happy with this draw knife too. So now we've got our hammer handle fitted up and cleaned up a little bit. I cleaned up my profile and gave it a more smooth, comfortable handle for my purposes for blacksmithing. I don't really like that super ovate shape. I like it a little more, well, it's still oval, but a little rounder, especially right through here, because that gives me a nice place to hold to where I can still have quite a bit of power behind the blow, but I can have a nice comfortable place to grip where my hand can sit comfortably. You might say, why not just go with the smaller handle? Because sometimes you got to grab it by the end and you got to whip that sucker hard. So I'd rather have a longer lever and not need it. It's not really going to get in my way. This is only an 18-inch handle. It's just because it's closer to the camera, it looks a little bigger. See, in front of my chest, it's not very big. Our hammer faces are polished. Our handle is attached. So all that's left to do is char the handle, sand it real quick, and oil it. And then this hammer will be ready for duty. Get these last little bits that I didn't quite reach at the forge. That way everything's nice and even looking when I sand it again, and that way we get a nice char over the whole surface of the piece. And now we've got a nice charred blackened handle. So we're gonna go ahead and sand this up real fast just to knock off that surface level, and then I will go ahead and oil it. And for those of you wondering why it is that I'm sanding it after I charred it, this helps to smooth out the surface after it's been burned to give the surface grain a very smooth finish. And it also removes all the soot and carbon buildup on the handle before I oil it. And not just a prettier end result, but a smoother end result. So we'll let this sit for a while, let that soak in, and we'll be back after a couple of repetitions of doing that. So here we are with our finished hammer. We've got that nice rounding face, the nice peen, and a really nice charred, dark hickory handle. American wood, American steel, and American labor to build my first big forging hammer. I've made some smaller hammers before, but nothing like this. Even the war hammers I made have smaller heads than this. But this is going to be my new, let's say, heavy-duty material mover. The cross peen is incredibly useful for stretching material this way. Well, whatever direction the peen is, whether it's a straight peen or a cross peen. A cross peen is going to spread up and down. A straight peen is going to spread right and left, because the sharper the depression here, the less material you're displacing and the more you're just kind of cutting into the material. So you want a kind of a thick edge on that in order to really spread the material well. Our hammer is all set,
all ready to rock and roll. This is a 4-pound beast of a hammer, and I'm happy I actually did this. I've been putting this build off for about a year because I got this and another one at a swap meet. I believe this is a 2-pound, 3-pound, something like that. This feels a lot lighter, so it's probably a 2.5 at most. But I'm going to make that one into a diagonal peen or something else, another forging hammer, because I plan on making myself several new hammers. Since I do everything by hand, the hammers that I have really help to change what I can do. Having a cross peen is great, but a straight peen is a big help. Because when you're working something and you're stretching it and you want to stretch it sideways, if you're using a cross peen, you have to turn the material sideways and turn the cross peen sideways and try and hammer on it across. Whereas with this, if I want to do that, I just have to turn the material sideways and hit it, and it will spread the direction I want. So this is going to be much more useful in terms of the work that I do, at least, to have a straight peen for stretching out leaf spring and coil spring and all that fun stuff, and getting more length than width when I want a longer, thinner blade or something like that. I am going to epoxy resin that top just as a precaution to keep moisture out and to keep it from, you know, falling apart over time as much. Not really necessary, but it will help protect it a little bit. But you'll see this hammer in a lot of future videos. I'm going to be using this thing a lot. Just like this draw knife, you saw me use this a lot in this video. There's a video right there if you want to see how I made it. And just like this little set hammer I made out of a ball peen that I used to make the cruxes on this guy. You'll notice it fits just about perfectly in all those little areas because it was formed by this tool. That's how you make those shapes. Sometimes I do these forging videos where I show how to make tools. A lot of the time I'm making blades that I sell, whether that be swords, knives, pole arms, things like that, and I sell those over on Etsy. But if you guys want, let me know in the comments if I should do more of these tool making videos where I show how to make different types of blacksmithing tools from like scrap tools, like that engineer's hammer that I have up there, or the one that I used to make this. Because you can either pay $200-300 for a premium forging hammer, or you can learn how to heat treat and go get yourself a scrap hammer and make your own forging hammers. In my opinion, it's more cost effective, and you'll learn more along the way, become more skillful along the way, because you're adapting to learn how to make more tools than just what's in your repertoire. But that does it for today's video. If you guys like what you've seen, do me a favor, do that thing right there. And until next time, God bless, stay sharp out there. If you're looking for a custom sharp object like a knife, sword, pole arm, axe, whatever, check out the Etsy store. Link will be at the end of the video.